All right. Drinking milk coffee tonight. You know, I just realized that the most effective way to communicate what I desire to do in my memoirs, rather than to have to go through a lot of long stories, is to simply tell you. Chronological order: first memory, 2 years old, on the back of Robbie's tricycle. My mom said, do not go down to the Savagios. Savagios were Catholic and had 12 kids. Not that they were bad, but simply the distance away from the house, 300 yards or so. And Robbie didn't seem to have any problem with that command. And I went with him at 2 years old. And at 2 years old, I still feel the shame of my mom not abusing me, reprimanding me when Robbie was in control the whole way. It was ridiculous. So that was my first memory. The next memory was JFK's assassination, and the neighbor lady, Eleanor Ritz, came into the house screaming, they've killed the president, they've killed the president. And then 4 was a pretty good year. And I guess it wasn't so good for my mom with 5 kids by now. And she sent me to kindergarten at 4 years old. And man, I could have used that extra year in athletics. Can you imagine if I had a full extra year of growth and muscle, playing basketball, playing tennis, etc.? It would have been awesome. But, you know, she had so many kids, and I got farmed out, and that's the way it went. Funny memories from school. Well, I went to kindergarten and Pearl Road School, which you've probably gone by a million times. But anyway, the little kids met in the church, just in the classroom building there. And we came out. It was a bright, sunny day. We were going home, and all of a sudden, I saw a friend of mine, a little guy, take off his shoe in the middle of all the commotion and urinate right into his shoe. It was one of the more interesting thought process. Why would he do in the shoe? Wouldn't make a mess. He had to go right now, blah, 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 blah. But I'll never forget this 5-year-old kid peeing in his shoe. Further memories, Annapolis, Maryland. I actually go back to 2 years old in Annapolis, Maryland. My father was in the Navy as an officer and a physician for 2 years. And I remember the jellyfish in the bay there in Maryland. And they were abundantly all over. And my dad warned us and warned us. I have memories of camping with Annie and Bobo on a beach at 2 years old, and then going to Washington, D.C. That was a very interesting time for a tiny infant. Stories along the way. There's just so many of them. Playing with other kids. One thing, when we got to Cleveland Heights, we found that I could hang out with all ages of kids, and that was good and bad. The good part was playing sports. The bad part is 3 or 4 of these older kids got the idea that they were going to put a huge, narrow path of leaves across the street and then just kind of hang out and see how the police responded. I was scared shitless because I didn't get a good hiding place at all. I was literally just up against a building. Would have been totally screwed. And then one kid came by with the bicycle who had nothing to do with the leaving, but he said he saw us run into a house across the street. The cops were running, or went over to that house and started pounding on the door, and we were just laughing, or Peter Sykes was just laughing his ass off. as the cops were misdirected, and drivers would come by and do all kinds. Some just steamed right through, and some reason that there might be a kid buried under there, and they took their time and they dug around. Well, enough of that. One guy finally called the police, and that was that. So those are the type of memories that I want to focus on. Experiencing the metro parks at 6 years old in Parma Heights, and going across a half-inch layer of ice because I was the lightest one, bobbing up and down on the ice until I fell through. And then Robbie had the bright idea that I lay down on a sled and that he'd pull me home rather than we run as fast as we could, not to freeze, and warm up. That was a harsh early memory. I have early memories from Cleveland Heights of going to the Browns games before the dog pound was called the dog pound, and there were tons of blacks and whites and everything around. I'll never forget this one guy had "Eat Your Honey" on the back of his shirt, and another guy had his girlfriend had honey on the back of her shirt. So I'd never experienced this kind of comedy, and I was in 5th grade, and they were drinking whiskey, smoking dope, just doing absolutely everything. And a guy picked up Steelers quarterback one time and threw him on his head when you could do that, and the whole dog pound was screaming with joy as Steelers quarterback Bradshaw was stunned, and we were yelling, "Break his neck! He broke his neck! He broke his neck!" as they wheeled him off in a gurney and then to an ambulance. So we got to see baseball. Fond memories going to a Cleveland Indians baseball game in 1965-66 with my grandfather Robert Wass. It was absolutely, and some of the best memories of all were Matt and I going over to Robert B. Wass's in Bath, up that Shade Road hill, and just playing, climbing pine trees, exploring. It was absolute phenomenal, waking up with complete and utter joy, and then go jumping around in my grandparents' bed, and then getting anything we wanted. I once was sneaking into the ice cream because we never were allowed. If we sneak in, we'd be punished. And Grandma Annie just simply said, "Oh, you want a bowl of ice cream?" So it was through Grandma Annie's influence that I realized there was another way of parenting, and that was unconditional love. Perhaps only grandparents do that, but her mark was indelible, as was Robert B. Wass, who was an extremely successful broadcaster and had a show on the Cleveland Indians in the 1954 World Series that we won. And as I learned more and more about his career, it became more and more fascinating to me. He ran the whole newsroom, 10 people below him, and they got the scoop on the Texas City munitions disaster, where all these boats with munitions exploded, and the shockwave of confession, the shockwave of the concussion went a quarter mile away, and the littler they were, the more they would die instantly. And he rented a little plane with another of his colleagues, and they scooped all the national media on this full-time disaster story and munitions being shared in civilian ports. And on and on. Luther was a huge part of my life. Going down to Medina Springs and going fishing, and at night going through the canals right at the edge of the Gulf of Mexico under the bridges where the king salmon hung out, and we were using ladyfish that were about a foot long themselves as bait. So the schnook, as they called them, were 15 pounds and 30 inches long. I got a picture of Amy where my mom was holding up the fish, and it was as big as she was. High school memories, absolute abundance at Eisenhower High School. Perfectly clear memories of bullies, of sports, of being all conference in two sports, in wrestling and cross country, running 6-minute miles as a 14-year-old. And Robbie and Matthew's presence, all of us in the same high school. It was bizarre. I followed in their shoe steps, and sometimes that was good, and sometimes that was bad. Berea High School, the worst year of my life, really academically, and all this attention was being lavished on Maddie. Yeah, Maddie's depressed. Maddie's not happy. Maddie isn't the starting quarterback. Oh, what are we going to do about Maddie? Do we send him back to an old high school and let him stay with the McVickers? Oh my gosh, let's give him flying lessons down at the down the street on Prospect in Strongsville, and all of this, and I was utterly depressed beyond Matthew's comprehension. I had given up and chickened out on cross country, which I could have run 5:30 miles after that, and I'd given up wrestling. I was embarrassed. I was amused. I was abused by strangers. Horrible year. And then I came alive at Lake Ridge Academy, and a huge part of the memoir will be Lake Ridge Academy, just all the incidences. A kid fell through the roof into the library, and the ceiling into the library. He had been taking pictures of women going to the bathroom and was looking for his exit, and he just went right through the ceiling into the library. That was Billy Van Sickle, who was a ne'er-do-well in high school, but ended up selling his business for $10 million as he became an adult. Who knows? First love, first sex at Karen Van Sickle, who lived in an absolute mansion. Sports, playing at a small school. We started at every sport on a varsity level so that you could really focus on basketball and on lacrosse, which I picked up in just a month. And all of a sudden, I was all conference in lacrosse again. So all of these memories, I was not academic. I thought I was stupid because the math, algebra 2, trigonometry, pre-calculus, calculus at university level. I excelled at none of these. Physics based often on math, I was weak at. Chemistry I hated. Biology was barely tolerable. I honestly, perhaps with a higher IQ, like you have as well, thought I was stupid for about 18-20 years, because I did belong at a high school for the performing arts or Lake Ridge Academy from 10th grade on. I really would have flourished in that. I'm up to 13 minutes, but I really would have flourished in that kind of environment. And then college is basically the story of the breakdown and the comeback and religious fanaticism, and then mellowing out and doing nothing, and trips in a car to California, trips to Colorado where Maddie made me go, and I had a plane ticket in my hand, and we were in MG without heat, and it was 5 degrees outside. There were holes in the plastic windows. We passengers traveled in a thick sleeping bag, and all for the sake of Matt selling this car, which was for $900, was subsequently just dumped on the side of the road. Police called him and said, "Hey, your car's on the side of the road." Matty didn't want to bother, said, "No, I've already sold that car." And then the Auschwitz experience, very painful, but a very good story behind that. And you've heard just a snippet of what I went through at Wheaton, and then finally graduating from bulging groin, and then traveling to Australia to go to a performing arts college, and just being overwhelmed by being a foreigner. And everywhere I went, people completely looked at me. Best opportunity of my life, and unfortunately, it didn't go. So I think I'll cut it off now, and These are the types of stories I'm going to write about. Thank you. Good day.